Welcome to my channel. My name is Carolyn and I talk about books. So, I think we can all agree that 2020 has kind of been a little bit of a fail up until this point. So I thought we would inject some positivity into 2020 and I would talk about my top 5 favorite books that I have read so far. I've tried to come up with a variety of genres, so maybe there'll be something for everybody in here. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first book I have on my list is actually a nonfiction book, and that is going to be Furiously Happy, a funny book about horrible things by Jenny Lawson. So this is a hilarious book, but it also packs a really great punch. The author suffers from depression and anxiety, and I myself do as well as bipolar disorder. So this was an incredibly helpful and heartfelt book for me personally. There were a couple scenes in here that were really hard to read, but really, really helpful. I found myself calling my husband into the room so I could read it to him, and I called my mom and read some of this to her because I felt like it was so helpful to finally see things that I had been feeling written down on paper, but it was also making me crack up at the same time. There's a lot of language in this, so some people find that a little bit triggering, but for me it was not a problem, and I found this book to be incredibly funny, incredibly heartfelt, but incredibly poignant and really, really helpful at the same time. The next book I have on my list is actually an historical fiction novel. Most people have already heard about this one, but I only read it this year, and that is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Historical fiction used to be a genre that I picked up all the time. There were two genres or two time periods in particular that I really gravitated toward, and one is the Tudor period in England and one was World War II. But I feel like World War II has become such a saturated time period in historical fiction that there has to be something special for me to reach out and pick the book up. And I feel like The Book Thief did just that. This book is obviously set in World War II, but it's set in Germany and you're following a group of civilian Germans. And so that's something I don't see a lot of. I think sometimes you're following other groups of people, but that was a really unique thing, as well as the fact that this book is told from the point of view of death. So I found that really, really fascinating. It was kind of strange because death spoils you at the very beginning, he tells you who's going to die, and then as you get through the book, he keeps spoiling you again, and he's like, oh wait, this person's a goner, and this is how it's gonna happen. And you're like, wait a second, I'm not gonna get attached to these characters if you're telling me that they're gonna bite the dust, but that didn't happen at all. You get super attached, and I ended up finishing this book while my husband and I were working on a puzzle together, and all of a sudden I just stopped working on the puzzle, and I put my hand up, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna need a moment, and I just started crying. So this book still really packs a punch, and like I said, because it's told from you're being kind of walked through life with a group of Germans, it brings up that point of at what point are people innocent and what point are people just doing things to survive. It's a really interesting perspective that I hadn't seen a lot of in historical fiction in the World War II time period. The next book that I really enjoyed, number 3 on the list, is a thriller, and that is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. The first Riley Sager book I read was Lock Every Door, and I really enjoyed it. And people tend to think tend to say that that's their favorite of his, but actually I find that this might actually be my favorite of his. This is about a girl, actually a young lady now, but when she was a young girl, she went away to summer camp and all of her cabin mates actually went missing. So they ended up shutting the camp down, and they decide while she's kind of grown up to be a young adult, she's an artist, the camp decides to reopen and they call her to come be a counselor there. And so she decides to go back, not only to kind of get some closure, but try and figure out what actually happened while she was when she was a child, and kind of try and solve this mystery. So I found this really fast-paced. I think I stayed up till 3 in the morning finishing this one, and I feel like that's what a great thriller does. You're so invested in it that you're just turning the pages. You're getting paper cuts from how quickly you're turning the page. So that was definitely one of those. For me, it was surprising me all the way till the last page. I feel like you get to a certain point in a thriller and you think all the twists have already happened. This one really psyched me out, and it really kept surprising me the entire time. The next book that I have, I'm really excited that I get to talk about it rather than just type about it on my Bookstagram account, because this one I feel definitely needs a disclaimer. This is one of the most captivating books I feel like I have ever read. But because of the subject matter, I don't feel like it's something I can honestly recommend to everyone. And that book is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. So this book is about a young girl. She's 15 years old, and she is having a relationship with her 40-something-year-old teacher. It's set in dual time periods, so it's set in the early 2000s when the relationship is happening, and then it's set in 2017 during the Me Too movement. So now the adult version of her is sort of looking back on this relationship that she sort of idealized and wondering if it was in fact something a little bit more sinister. Because of the subject matter, I feel like, again, I can't recommend this to everybody. It was incredibly well done. It was incredibly haunting, and I could not put this book down if you had waved a pile of money in my face. It was so well done. It is very graphic. It is very icky. But again, it was incredibly well done, and I feel like I have to mention it on the best books that I've read so far in 2020. It was such a believable progression between the two time periods. And one thing that I really liked, though I have never found myself in this position, it was very believable for me to see this young girl and feel how she and her vulnerability would get caught up in something like this, how she would be groomed in this way. And then you see her as an adult and why she might not want to believe it was what it really was, and why she's holding on to something as horrific and as tragic as this. So again, this was incredibly haunting. It was incredibly captivating. I was just absolutely drawn into this. The characters, I mean, like I said, I was getting sick to my stomach, but it was so well done that I feel like I can't not mention this book. It was so, so well done. And the last book that I have on my list, why would it be anybody different? Why would it be anybody but Frederic Bachman? This is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. This is actually a novella. You can see it's very, very short. I listened to it on audiobook, but then it was so moving and I cried so much that I knew I needed to add it to my collection. But this is a story about a grandfather who has Alzheimer's and his relationship with his grandson. And it is just beautiful. I think when I describe any Frederic Bachman book, people go, oh, that sounds really sad. And though it is sort of like punching you in the feels, you're not crying because it's sad, you're crying because it's beautiful and it's hopeful and it's relatable. And so I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was beautiful. I listened to it in one sitting. I was making sandwiches for my husband and I for lunch, and he came downstairs and I was crying and he had no idea what was going on, and I told him it's just Frederic Bachman, and for some reason that's just kind of the magic word in our house. He just goes, oh, okay, well then that's fine. But it was such a beautifully well done book. It is so quick. You could go right through it. It's just gorgeous, and I don't have anything else to say about that. So there you go. Those are my top 5 favorite books that I have read so far in 2020. I'm excited for all the other great books that I'm going to read this year. If you've liked my content so far, it would be really helpful if you would just give the video a like and you would hit subscribe. I would be eternally grateful to you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye, friends.